name is Phil O'Halloran, and I'm a registered voter in Michigan, where I've lived since 1986. My comments are based on sworn affidavits of myself and others in a group I organized, and I'm speaking under oath. I've been a GOP challenger on many occasions dating back to the mid-1990s. I was at the TCF Center on in the general election 2018 and also the August 2020 primary. I saw that ballot security was a serious problem, and chain of custody of the ballots arriving at the TCF Center was virtually non-existent. So in October, I organized a group of volunteers to observe ballot movements from the Department of Elections on West Grand Boulevard to the TCF Center. The following are some of the things our group discovered. While ballots are generally transported by two people, on more than one occasion there was just a single transporter. At the departure point, which was the Department of Elections, the loading of the vehicles was rarely, if ever, supervised by election officials. We saw no transfer paperwork, no people with clipboards logging the departure and arrival times, no logging of the type or number of ballots on departure, or any logging of the type or number of ballots on arrival at the TCF Center. One man was even photographed carrying 100 blank ballots under his arm in the alley behind the Department of Elections. The ballots were in no container whatsoever, which is required by law. The man said he had been doing this all week long. The ballot transporters are mostly temporary employees hired for the election, and when I asked election officials if the transporters underwent background checks, we were told at the conference that the workers underwent a human resources process, but they would not confirm that any background checks occurred. And these are transporters who often carry thousands of ballots. The transporters frequently arrived at the TCF in an assortment of cars and vans, many with out-of-state plates, and they did not appear to be rentals. On the afternoon of the November 4th, I observed a Penske truck that was parked outside the Department of Elections that appeared to be guarded by two men in a City of Detroit pickup parked behind it. They told me that the truck was empty, but when we returned about 4 hours later after dark around 9:30, the two men were still behind the Penske truck. Later at around 10 p.m., after being barred entry to the TCF Center, I returned and saw the truck leaving the DOE and followed it to the TCF Center, where it disappeared inside the rear service entrance. I then encountered a SWAT team blocking my entrance to the county board, and informed the sergeant that if the truck I described was delivering ballots to be counted this late after the close of polls, 26 hours later, that it would be a crime. He said he would not search the truck that night, but would report the incident to DPD. I do not know the result of that investigation or if one took place. I conclude that the lack of a chain of custody and the transport of thousands of absent voter ballots over several days is a serious threat to election integrity, and it makes it impossible to guarantee the results of the election.
I wanted to start by showing you, this is a book. I actually printed these affidavits last night. These are affidavits from Republican poll watchers or poll challengers that witnessed incredible events at the TCF Center. Mostly they're all from the TCF Center. So I want to thank you for having me. I've been a poll challenger for 9 years. When I got there, I began working on the duplicate ballot process, where one poll worker would hold the ballot that they needed to duplicate, and the other would have a blank ballot and they would duplicate it. And then there was a witness that would stand behind them. And I knew the procedure at every table because, like I said, I had been trained to be an election worker, so I knew what was going on. We were never told that the person that was inspecting the ballot, their job was to stand in front of the Republican poll challenger, but consistently, that's what we saw. Whenever we would try to watch the process, the person that was inspecting the ballot would stand in front of us, and if we tried to move to the side, one of the agitators that were at the TCF Center, and there were lots of agitators that were there working on behalf, in my opinion, of the Democrat Party. They would challenge us and tell us to stand back, that we were too close, that we were going to kill people with COVID. So that's what we encountered, and we were not allowed to get up close to the ballots. It just was prohibited, wasn't allowed. At one point, when the military ballots came in, we were told to take a break, that it was a good time to take a break. I'd been there for 6 hours. I worked for a total of 13 hours that day, and the only time I sat down because Republican poll workers had to go upstairs to another room to get lunch. Democrats and the agitators all had a corner where food was brought into them. They were served food. They didn't have to leave. When it was time to go to lunch, we had to leave because we didn't have food provided. We had to go to another room. When we got back, the doors were locked. I was able to get back into the room, but I witnessed pizza boxes being placed over the windows so that the poll challengers couldn't see in, and those were being placed over the windows by election workers and by the agitators that were down there. Jocelyn Benson was on the radio with Frank Beckman, where she talked about the poll challengers, and she told him that the police had to cover the windows. There were no police that were even anywhere near where the windows were being covered because the windows were being broken by the poll challengers. I don't know why she felt it necessary to completely make up a story about what happened. I real briefly just wanted to mention about the military ballots. When it was time to count the military ballots.
You need to wrap up.
Pardon?
I'll give you 15 more seconds
to
wrap up.
Not one of the military ballots was a registered voter. And the ballots looked like they were all exactly the same Xerox copies of the ballot. They were all for Biden across the board. There wasn't a single Trump vote, and none of the voters were registered. They had to manually enter the names and addresses and a birth date of 1/1/2020, which would override the system and allow them to enter non-registered voters, of which I saw several that day.
My name is Rhonda Weber, and I'm going to provide some sworn testimony. I noticed a man working in front of the elections area with an open bin, accepting ballots as people would drop them off. Then I noticed a black SUV parked on West Grand Boulevard, and a woman with blonde hair was taking a Tupperware and dropping these off into the man's unsecured area or kind of box. And she did this 3 times. And so what I did was I took a picture of that, and I have photos of that, so if you'd like to see them. Then on the day after elections, I was providing observation in the back of Department of Elections where there's a big garage door. I was then kind of relieved of my post by an off-duty police officer, and all of a sudden he contacted me and said, "We have a gentleman who has ballots in his hand, placed them in the back of the car, and he's driving off." And I was right at the alley on 2nd at West Grand Boulevard, so I followed him. I have photos of that also. And he went to the post office, which is a few blocks east of West Grand Boulevard. I then got out of my car and took some photos of him, putting in white envelopes that were in post office trays into the back of the car. I have a license plate. It was a municipal vehicle, and I have the license plate. And again, these photos. He then saw that I was taking his photo. So when he pulled out, he boxed me in, and it became quite aggressive, and I was scared. And him doing that prevented me from following him, but he went down in the direction to Woodward and then made a left, so he would have been going in the direction of TCF. I then spoke to my colleague, who was an off-duty police officer, and he was back at Department of Elections at 2 o'clock that day. And this is, again, the day after elections, and I have photos of this.
My name is Lori Levi from Canton, Michigan. I am a registered voter, and I was at the TCF Center as a poll challenger. What I'm going to focus on is the thing that was most disturbing to me. I was under the impression that as a poll challenger, our primary responsibility is to make sure before a vote is cast that ballot is either in the registered poll book, the computer book, or in the paper poll book, of which anytime as a challenger I tried to look at the ballot and then try to verify it, I would get 2 or 3 of the poll workers literally screaming at me to get back 6 feet. However, we did not know that that had been overturned the night before, which would have been helpful. But at no time were we able to physically see the ballot and then see it in the electronic book. The person opening the ballot would probably be sitting where Senator Theis is, and the electronic screen that we were supposed to be watching is basically to where the committee clerk is. Now, I don't know if you guys got binocular vision, but I don't. So I cannot look at a ballot over here, run down to this screen, and be able to see it and verify that it is the same. I did address that with them multiple times, and they told me, sorry, I should have planned better. Plan better as to how? Needing binoculars? I mean, we as a poll challenger are supposed to verify the name, address on the ballot to the electronic poll book. And if it is not there, then it is supposed to be in a paper poll book, of which there was a significantly large poll worker. Anytime that I said that is not in the book, when she would scan it, it would not come up on the screen, then she would basically hover over this paper book, sometimes checking something, and other times we could see that they did not check it. And then they proceeded to manually enter these into the electronic poll book, where then they would come up on the screen. Many of these papers were not absentee ballot, the yellow envelope, the standard ballot. Some of them were on printed paper. Some of them were in white envelopes. Some of them had multiple papers attached to them. So then they would manually enter them into the electronic book. And I wrote down as many as I could see as quickly as they were entering them. So yesterday, my husband and I attempted to verify these addresses. Out of the 8 or 9 addresses here, we were only able to verify that there was one voter that actually lived at this address. And I can present to you one voter. I don't want to say their name, but you have it. This is their address that they show on their voter registration card. This is a church, of which it is illegal to register to vote anywhere but at your home address.
I was a poll challenger with the Nonpartisan Election Integrity Fund, both on Tuesday, November 3rd and Wednesday, November 4th. On Tuesday, I was a poll challenger for the city of Royal Oak, where only 10 ballots out of the 25,000 ballots were spoiled and not able to be matched to the QVF, qualified voter file. Royal Oak ran their absentee ballot counting board perfectly. The chain of custody was broken at the absentee counting board in Detroit. I watched as hundreds and thousands of ballots came in that poll workers were not able to verify in the QVF nor the paper logbook. Yet, that ballot was removed from the secrecy sleeve, bunched together with other verified ballots, counted and ran through the high-speed tabulators. I have a sworn affidavit of this and have attached it to my public statement. I was able to challenge only 2 of these ballots and get them entered into the record. I attempted to challenge more, but the poll workers simply refused, verbally attacked me, and had others do the same. Since then, I volunteered with Guard the Vote. Over the last 3 weeks, Guard the Vote had over 1,000 volunteers painstakingly go through 30,000 of the 172,000 absentee votes in the city of Detroit and found the following results, which I've brought with me here. 229 of these 30,000 we went through are deceased. We have proof of this. Senator Lucido, you were asking for proof. 2,660 of them, invalid addresses described by vacant lots and burnt down houses. Can someone in this room tell me how a deceased person can vote? Nonetheless, at the very lowest levels, if these percentages carry through, this means that of the 172,000 AV votes in the city of Detroit, 1,300 of them could be deceased. We're investigating it. Another 15,000 could have fraudulent addresses described as living on vacant lots or burnt down houses. What I can say for sure, and swear to you here today, I can say that overall 8.9% of the 30,000 absentee ballots that we've gone through and investigated just in the city of Detroit were unqualified fraudulent ballots that should have been spoiled. And again, I have this printed out on the list. It's available for all of you. Why should this alarm you? Because this confirms that the City of Detroit poll workers were not properly performing a crucial step of verifying ballots in the qualified voter file, corrupting the whole chain of custody. And despite that, as I've sworn in my affidavit, and so has many others, those ballots were in fact counted and ran through the high-speed tabulators. We can prove there is fraud, which should disturb all of us.